how do you find this balance with this trend of like feeling enough, like enoughness, and then the side of us that's always willing to grow, always willing to get better? How do we like know the healthy balance between those two, sort of dynamics?
It's attention, I think. And that is something that most of us are uncomfortable with. There's a way in which the mind is very dualistic. It's black or white, it's right or wrong. And so it's very hard to grapple with these in-between situations where I want to work on myself, and at the same time, I also want to have comfort, right? And that's kind of where we struggle, because there are times in our life where we tend to really want to work on ourselves, but then we're missing and we're lacking that comfort. And because of that, we can burn ourselves out. And then we like veer back to comfort. And then there's that desire of, oh, I'm just kind of, eating too much, watching too much Netflix, and not really chasing after my goals, whatever that is. And because of that, I now am like pendulum swinging back and forth, or I get stuck in one, and both of them aren't healthy. And so it's learning how to be in the tension of how do I stretch myself? And I think a guiding principle I have always found is time, place, and circumstance. So you can elaborate that into season of life as well. There may be seasons of life where stretching and actually working on our inner selves is actually more crucial. There's the time, there's the environment, everything is kind of set up in your favor. And if we're paying attention, we can be in tune with that. And there may be times where actually needing to pull back a little bit is necessary because our energy is required somewhere else. But always kind of having that, like that eye on, when should I be pushing a little bit more? When do I need to pull back a little bit is the key to kind of figuring that out.
Right. And it's so I guess when let's talk about keeping promises to yourself. Can you like talk a little bit about what that means? Is it like resolutions? Is it like going through your to-do list? What does it mean? And I just then want to jump back into what you said about life and circumstance, because I'm on vacation right now with my family, and my sister has a 1-year-old baby, and she keeps being pressured around like, oh, you need to lose weight, you need to do this and that. And look at this woman who's like already thin up to 3 months, and she was sharing with me how difficult it was, and she just, all the energy that she wants right now is just spent on the baby, spent on her work. You have to pick and choose sort of your battles with what you were saying, because a lot of your energy and attention is on the kid and not on the other areas. I would say areas of growth, because it doesn't have to, be an objective. But if she wanted to, it's going to be maybe a different season, of her life, not now.
Absolutely.
But going back to the definition of what is keeping promises to yourself, what does that mean?
Keeping promises to ourselves is to be able to keep our word on what we are saying. And so it's a matter of integrity. When we say something, we do it. Now, most of the time we think of that in terms of other people. But now when we're thinking about it in terms of ourselves, it really opens this place that many of us may not spend a lot of time in. And that is, am I worth keeping that promise? Because there's a way in which, especially as women, right, that it's almost easier to keep promises to other people. But when it comes to me, there's a way in which I either don't have that capacity, or it's just much more difficult. I'd rather prioritize somebody else than myself. And so I would say that being able to really explore that relationship is so important. And so whether it's with keeping promises to ourselves or anything, I think the starting place is really understanding the relationship we have with this concept or this theme. And so it would be, what is my relationship like with keeping promises to myself? And for many of us, that relationship is very complicated.
Yeah, it's almost like if I'm wondering if it also impacts our confidence or relationship to ourselves. If we don't keep promises to ourselves, it's kind of like that flaky friend, you know, who says, oh yes, I'll do this, but then never show up on time or cancels on you. You know, that flaky friend who ends up not being a friend anymore, that you don't trust, and you kind of like, you know, you're there's a lower esteem on that friend or that person who's not keeping promises to yourself. So I guess like you have to like see yourself as your best friend, and if you start keeping promises to yourself, you get a boost in self-esteem. Would you say so?
Exactly. And it's painful to admit this, but I really resonate when you speak about, having a friend who's flaky and who may not really step up. I have been that person. And when I really look and see, I recognize now that the root is I wasn't keeping promises to myself. And there's a saying, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And so for a while, we can fool ourselves almost into thinking it's easier for me to keep promises to other people. But ultimately, it comes back to me. If I'm not doing that, like you say, if I don't think of myself as my own best friend, right, and I'm not keeping my own word, keeping that integrity alive, then it becomes very easy for that to slip and leak out onto other people.
Yeah. I see like those two profiles, like either people like giving too much energy for others so that they can, this becomes a distraction, like being a caretaker all the time. My mom is a little bit in that category. Like I'm just gonna really give to everyone and keeping promises to people. But then maybe like not spend enough time with herself and, you know, like be in service for herself. And then you have the other side, what you were describing, a person who has so much to really like work on for themselves that they end up being flaky with others because they don't have that capacity to give. Can you tell me a bit more about these two profiles? Because how come that someone, so it's basically both are showing imbalance. And then I heard the third type of person, which is the fully balanced. When I heard someone say the most generous people are those with like the strongest boundaries. And when I hear this quote with what the conversation is, someone who's able to like, you know, put their oxygen mask on themselves first, like really like build that strong like confidence and taking the time for themselves first in the morning so that they can help others. And you know, keeping promises to themselves so that they can like show up for others when they need to. I'm
Yeah,
curious.
that's a great observation. And we could probably find other types of ways in which people relate to this topic as well. But you brought up three, so let's talk about those three. And so with those who are really looking to fill other people's needs, right? And they're not really looking and caring about their own. And there are many, many people like that. And to be honest, even the role of a mother tends to have that kind of imposition upon it, like just give selflessly. And there is a place and a deep need for that, but it can come at a cost. And so what happens sometimes for those who are built in that way is it can actually start to build up resentment. And it happens really slowly, and it starts to like percolate, because there's a way in which there are strings attached. The reason why we do anything is because we're trying to fulfill a need. So one reason why somebody may do that is because they want to feel loved. They want to feel connected, right? And so by giving and keeping all these promises to other people, there's a way in which they may actually feel, I don't really have any needs. There's nothing I really need to do for myself. It's other people who need help. Like, I'm okay, I'm fine. But they're not recognizing I need to fill my own cup first. And so this is something I've witnessed. They keep giving and giving and giving, and they may be really good at keeping promises to other people. But at a certain point, they start to overextend themselves. They're not able to keep promises to everybody that they've said that they would meet. And now they're feeling like very overwhelmed. And because of that, they're starting to have that resentment, starting to feel anger. But it's
Mm.
because they never really took care of themselves first.
Yeah. I'm almost wondering if sometimes you also, yeah, you give to people and then you set up expectation from the people who receive from that caretaker. But those are like not always the best people, the best friends. Like they're just here to receive, and that person just giving needs external validation, love, and but I mean, I'd be interested to for that person to like suddenly stop doing all those things and recognize who is really like connected, because it shouldn't be a transaction of I'm giving you something in exchange of love. And then you can argue well and say, this is my love language. I'm just, service is my love language. But sometimes we cannot hide behind those love languages, you know?
It's true. And we can use anything to justify our behavior as well. But there's a way in which it requires us, kind of coming back to this point of really looking at the relationship for ourselves. What is ultimately the relationship I'm talking about is like, how do I treat myself? How do I view myself? And when it comes to keeping promises, the biggest thing is that it is the way in which we operate in that sphere of our life is a representation of my relationship with myself. If I have a respect for myself, then there's a way in which there's a weight that is there when I say I'm going to do something. And if I'm unable to meet it, and I think this is the other part of it that's important, when I'm unable to meet it, I'm not brushing it aside. I'm not ignoring it. There's a way in which I can actually say to myself, okay, I said that, and I think we were discussing this earlier, I'm going to wake up early. It can be in a small thing, right? I'm going to wake up early. I didn't wake up early. Okay, I'm not just brushing it aside and making excuses. Instead, it's, okay, I didn't wake up early. Why? Let me actually look into it. Oh, I stayed up late last night. Okay, well, because of that, there's a responsibility I need to take now. So the certain time I wanted to allot to do something, I may not have anymore. And instead of complaining or becoming triggered or reactive, instead, I can take that with the type of integrity. Well, I didn't wake up early. This is the consequence.
It's interesting because the tone that you have when we say keeping promises to yourself, there is an undertone of like, yes, self-care, love, but there is also this like harsh love truth of like discipline. You have to do it. You're being disciplined versus like the self-indulgence tone, which could be seen as like, self-care. It's like, oh, I'm good. I don't need that. We're fine. And then just time after time, you're not keeping promises to yourself. And I want to go back to like what the promises means and what does it mean to be in a good relationship with yourself or fulfilling your needs. Does it mean let's say like the body, for example, like we say good we know in French, esprit sain dans un corps sain, good mind in a healthy body. What's in English?
Yeah, good mind and spirit.
Mind and
Esprit de
spirit.
corps.
Right, you start with your body, like needs, keeping promises to myself, be healthy and respecting my health, my body, eating nutritious food. I guess like sleeping well, but then again, if you need to wake up a little bit earlier, that might feel different. Could you like, is there like a universal way of loving yourself and respecting yourself from just the concept of like body and mind? There's like, you need to feel good in your body, good in your mind. Can you like give us a little of a example of a template of what it means to like maybe keeping those basic, I think say like relationship needs for yourself? I don't know if makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's so personal, right? And I think it's dependent, kind of going back to what you started off with your sister, and she has a 1-year-old and all of that. Her season of life right now, the way in which taking care of body, mind, soul, heart will look very different for her than say 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 3 years from now, right? It's constantly evolving and constantly changing. And I think that's something that gets missed, right? There's a way in which we think, well, If I'm eating right, then that is one way in which I can keep body, mind, soul, heart together, right? But even the way in which I eat may have to shift, right? So there's a constant looking at and constant fine tuning what that actually looks like for each person, depending on where they are in their life. So the basic things, like you kind of said, getting enough sleep, getting consuming nutritious food, that helps to keep the body in an active and alert state. Also moving it, that's also important, right? Now, when we also move now into the heart space is really about being in touch with our feelings, in touch with our emotions, right? But we can't do that if we're not grounded in the body. So there's also a way in which there's a hierarchy. It starts with the body. If we are not grounded in the body, the rest actually don't work. And so if we're grounded in the body, now the body becomes this container to actually allow for emotional energies to flow through. So now they're not getting stagnant, they're not getting stuck, right? And if they're not getting stuck, the heart can actually open up to what it is meant for, which is to offer kindness, compassion, care for not just other people, but myself as well. And if that is in line, is in tune, then my head becomes clear. I'm not constantly replaying old stories anymore. I'm not constantly thinking and redoubting myself. Instead, there's a way in which the head can start to bring forth realizations, knowledge, without me forcing it. And so that's what I think of when I think of a healthy body, head, heart. And now there's a way in which I can actually get in touch with my spirit. Because if these are the external coverings, the spirit is within, I need to find a way to access that. And it's very difficult to access that when there's a lot of noise going on. And our body, heart, and head offer a lot of noise when they're not in alignment.
I love what you say about the hierarchy, and all it starts with the body to allows for you said stuckness. And I want to ask, because it's almost like what you're saying. I'm putting a diagnostic on my dad. My dad is a man in his 70s, and since I've known him as a child, he's always been needed to work on himself. Like he's always been on a diet for all those years, always like trying to do better, never really like. And he told me this yesterday. And I just kind of like see the way that almost like the stress in his body, and he's not like doing meditation, or he's not doing maybe the body movement that he needs. Is that like kind of, because I think intuitively that's what I told him. I was like, I feel like you need to sit down, and you need to like ground yourself in your body, and you need to start like respecting it, and you start, like having, when you do meditation, I feel like grounding in your body, it's very physical. It's like the breathe, start with the breathing, you become present. It doesn't mean like going to the gym or anything. It could be just that. And I was thinking of maybe getting him to that stage, the meditation stage, because that could actually, to your point, then unlock a lot of things. Like, it's unstuck, then starts flowing, and then you start opening your heart, and then the mind is kind of the last parts where you maybe observe like those limiting thoughts, those like old programming of negative thinking. That's probably actually the reason why you're not able to like get past certain blockages in your life, or like not keeping promises to yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. And like you said, one requires the other. So if we want our head to be clear, it requires the heart to be doing its job. And I heard this once and I really found it to be so powerful. And that is typically what's happening is that the heart is very activated, triggered, agitated, and because of that, all of those energies, emotional energies, have no place to really go. And so the head starts to try to take care of the heart, right? So it's trying to figure out, well, what can we do to try to move away from this feeling of disappointment, hurt, sadness, whatever it is. And so they're kind of caught in a loop. So the head is not actually doing its job. The heart is not doing its job, and the body is completely forgotten. And so it's pulling ourselves back into our bodies that is so necessary. So that could be through meditation. I mean, I find that to be incredibly powerful. And that meditation can be as simple as I sit down for 5 minutes every day and just try to feel the ground beneath my feet. It doesn't even have to be anything else. I'm just sitting there and I'm really feeling it. I'm feeling how, even when I'm sitting on my chair, how the undercarriage of my body is supporting my weight. And all of these things, and along with breath that you mentioned, right? I'm really experiencing my body. And when I do that, I start to feel sensation in my body. I start to feel like, oh, actually, you know what? Like my shoulder is stiff. I didn't notice that, right? I'm noticing there's some tingling in my right arm, right? I'm noticing, oh, like there's some numbness in my foot. Oh, I didn't even realize, like that's uncomfortable, right? And now I'm trying to access the intelligence of the body. Right. And now the body can actually become a container, which is what it's for. That's what the body is. It's a container for us. It's a container for our emotions. It's a container for our life force, right? That's its purpose. And so when we allow for that container to be there instead of ignoring it, then all of those emotional energies have a place to actually flow through, move through.
So get like almost flushed. Can they get flushed through? Like, so let's give an example of, I feel like I felt angry.
Great example.
I'm feeling angry. What do I do in this moment? I can actually feel like the body reaction. It's usually in the gut. And then to your point, the mind is trying to solve like the anger in your heart by saying, but no, but this and that, but it's not really like, it's almost like not really like helpful at all, right?
It's not.
Just really like thinking. It's like actually the overthinking part of me where it should be like, so, okay, you observe that feeling. Now you're going to sit down, observe where it is in the body. Maybe it's in the stomach, and start the breathing. So for the body to do this job of like flushing it out. And what point does the mind come back? It's almost, I need to hear the workers, like what is the chain of working?
I get such a great visual when you put it that way. I love it. Yeah. And anger is such a great example, actually, because research has shown that it actually takes about 15 seconds for anger to like come in and be released.
Ooh, wow.
When we don't actually allow for like the experience of anger to be manifested in the body, it can stay and lay stagnant within different parts of our body for years.
Ooh, what?
Years. Is
it easy to remove if it's like for years? Like, what do you need to do?
No, it's even harder, right? I think you probably thought that instinctively, right? It's harder. Whenever something is stuck, it's much harder than if it appears and we can kind of deal with it. And so whether it's through sitting and taking some deep breaths. In fact, it's so funny. I had a client yesterday who was speaking about this. Something happened to her and she instinctively got really angry, but she had the presence of mind, and we've been cultivating this capacity in her to just notice her reaction. Her reaction was anger. She wanted to immediately do something about it, send off an angry text, like do whatever. But instead, she tried to breathe. She tried to breathe. And then some clarity came upon her. And she realized, I can choose to be angry about this or not. It's actually something so small. And she chose not to. And we were talking about it and we processed it. And later on, she realized, because I didn't react to that, I saved my entire weekend. I had an amazing weekend. If I had reacted to this small thing, my weekend would have been shot. I didn't even realize that.
I'm wondering how this is also, it's so much connected with when you say reacting to others, reacting to triggers, you're giving your energy away to others. So with the same example of the caretaker who puts, give promises to other people, you're giving the energy to other people. You allow your energy to flow there rather than focusing on yourself. And to your point, like she had a great weekend. Maybe if you're able to like better ground your body, understand your emotion, be less triggered, you then can become way more focused on what your needs are, right? So are we like, our mind is cluttered, our eyes are like blurred by the needs of others, but also like let ourselves react to the external world and anger, and it just moves us like further away from us and our needs and what we need to do in order to keep promises to ourselves again.
Yeah. So going back to the example of that person who's really trying to, to serve others, right? And is not really looking at what they need for themselves. If in that moment they get triggered and they start to feel angry or they start to feel resentful, if they actually start to allow the experience of that to be felt in the body, right? And kind of going back to answer the other question of where do the workers come in, right? Then there may be an ability for the heart to start to soften. And so when we talk about the heart actually fulfilling its true purpose, it's not for the heart to be triggered all the time. Actually, the purpose of the heart is almost like if it had a voice to say, wow, that must be really hard. It's offering compassion. It's like, wow, that must be really hard. It's let me just hold that. That must be really hard for you. Feeling like others may not be reciprocating or all of that. And then now the head starts to come in, and the head may now offer some clarity, offer some wisdom that is not about the stories of, wow, everybody is completely ungrateful, which may be true, but it's not causing more of a triggering reaction. It may be, I think I may have this need to feel connected and loved. Oh, that's my need. See, now like you're actually getting intelligence starting to come online. It's not just stories. The head is there to offer intelligence, insight, clarity. But if we're just wrapped up in our feelings and our activations, it doesn't do anything. And I think, kind of coming back to keeping promises to ourselves, many of us have this very reactive relationship with keeping promises to ourselves. And so we react in different ways. We ignore, we avoid, we don't talk about it, right? Or else we become really angry, we feel guilty, we feel ashamed, and or else we have a very rigid relationship with it too. It's like, I have to, there's just no way I can't, right? And that has that essence of like that tough love. But the thing is, there may be times where it can actually be detrimental to ourselves. And so again, coming back to that tension, that balance of being able to take responsibility of, I didn't keep this promise to myself. Why? Investigating it. Okay, there was a reason. I probably shouldn't have made that promise. It wasn't the right time.
Yeah, I mean, that's so powerful. You say, I think sometimes you don't make the right promises. So like first identifying if the promises or things you want to achieve on your list, it could be, I like to write a list and like say what I want to do.
Yeah.
Is it like something that's truly coming from you, or is it coming from exterior?
Ego.
So how do you recognize, what are the questions I should ask myself? Let's say I have my notebook here and I have a list of, I don't know, 10 things I want to do. And it has a timeline on, sometimes they don't. And I know like for sure those are the things I told myself I really want to work on. And those are the promises to myself. How do you like help people identify if those promises are the right ones? Is there like to a point, the timing thing? How would you help me go through that list?
Well, I'll say this, it's not something that you can do very quickly. It takes a bit of time. And I think the biggest place where the time is spent is in our attachment to certain goals. Right? We have an attachment to fulfilling certain things, achieving certain things, doing certain things, right? And in order to actually be able to make this kind of list, first, there needs to be a sense of being able to look very objectively. But when we're attached to something, it's very difficult to do that. And that's why we make promises, right? Which may not actually be helpful. So one promise that I know that many, many of us make to ourselves is, I want to achieve this by this date, very often professionally, right?
The
And
promotion or the money, like, okay, those things.
exactly. So it's like, I want to achieve this in 2 years, you know, or whatever it is. And so now I'm trying to do absolutely everything possible because I'm fueled by that attachment, right? But now it also blinds me because it may not be all dependent on my effort. You know, I work with other people. There's a culture within the company. There are all of these other variables that are out of my control. And so what that causes is a type of unnecessary suffering. So there's necessary suffering and there's unnecessary suffering, right? And so when we make these types of promises without perhaps caveats, right? So it's not like making that promise is bad or wrong. It's also knowing the full landscape. It's being intelligent about it, right?
Control, like know what you're in control of. Control the controllable. Basically.
Exactly. And also recognizing that, you know, ultimately the biggest thing when we're talking about promotion or money or any of that is, you know, we can do everything we can. And the person who kind of like controls the purse strings or can further your career, they may be blind to it, or they may not reciprocate in kind, right? So also knowing all of that is important.
I hear what you say is not keeping your promises on the result you don't control, but keeping promises to the way that you show up every day that might lead to the results. You cannot keep a promise to something you don't have a control of.
Exactly. I love how that you pull that out. Excuse me, because that's exactly what it's about. If we start to focus more on keeping promises on the process as opposed to the result, it's much more tangible. So if I want to lose weight, right? It's a good thing for me to have a goal. Like, I want to hit this number on a scale. Fine. Okay. But that can be held loosely. When that becomes the obsession, then it's actually very difficult. And then we experience all of these internal reactions, right? But instead, if I focus on, okay, well, that's what I'd like to hit, but my focus is on my everyday promise. My everyday promise is I'm going to eat nutritious meals, and I'm going to move my body, work out, and I'm actually going to take a look at my sleep, right? Because that can affect things. So now, because I'm focused on the process, I'm not just thinking about a number on a scale. I'm thinking about all of the things that are kind of required that will actually form these really helpful habits, not just to attain that number, but for everything in my life.
And so could we say that we hear like sort of reframe the word habit to like promises, like if we're reframing, because habits can easily be seen as not superfluous. Like a lot of people are like, oh, you have to have a better habit, but a habit is in a sense a promise that you make to yourself. You promise yourself every day you're gonna like do certain things in increments. Obviously that could or could not lead to the result you desire, but and it's kind of like working when I see people who are very dedicated with discipline, and you change the word discipline or change the word habit to like keeping promises to themselves, and because they show up to themselves, then they grow this self-confidence and they're so grounded, and then they can give to others. I see this like way more powerful than right, people who maybe overdo it or hustle, or like to your point are very attached, and there is like the create this unnecessary suffering or unnecessary burnout because there's this attachment. And if you're like you're really grounded with yourself, and to your point, it could be like a different season in your life where like, okay, you know what, it's really about me like being in touch with myself and giving the best energy I can to my kid, and just slowly like, you know, going back to work, and this is the promise I'm going to make to myself slowly and slowly. then it you know, I don't know, suddenly see like all the positive effects and impacts it can make.
Exactly. But all of that starts with really exploring this relationship we have. So
Yeah.
this exploration of like, what is my relationship with keeping promises with myself? Is it very reactive? Is it non-existent? Is it something that I don't want to even think about? Or am I so over focused that I can't see anything else? There's so many ways in which we relate to this. But when we start to like really like unpack it, look at it, start to see, like you said, like, is my focus only the result? Is it not on the process? You know, how is it affecting me in terms of like the emotions that are coming up? Is it getting stagnant in my body? Is that causing further suffering? Right now, we're starting to get a holistic view of, oh, this is what my relationship is like. Then you can start to work on the process. Because most of the time, even when we try to keep promises with ourselves, I'm focused on the process to get to the goal. I'm not focused on the relationship at all.
Yeah.
Because
How
that's
would
the basis.
Yeah. I'm a very practical person. I need to have homework. What would I do like and like how you said, you know, we talked about first ground in your body. There's like a hierarchy when it comes to, you know, reacting to a feeling, first ground yourself. To the topic of keeping promises to yourself, you said first understand, like make a little inventory on like where should we start with? Should we start with like when you say keeping promises to yourself, am I good? Do I do what I said I do? Do I do? And yes or no? And if no, is the reason because the promises are unrealistic? Like what would be like, give me like the sort of practical guide on how to start looking into this. And I know you'll have 4 lucky women who will be working with you on the 4 weeks program to help keeping promises to themselves. But I'm curious for the rest of the audience here, like if you have any like quick tips, and I know quick tips, that's what we ask, sometimes it's more complex.
Yeah. So yeah, looking forward to, you know, having this circle, this group coaching program of 4 women coming together. We'll do for 4 weeks, really exploring this. And so yeah, really hope that this will allow for them to go deeper and to actually start making some headway and really start to feel very aligned with themselves. Because like you said, there's also a piece to confidence that's so necessary, right? And you can take a look and check that out. But for a first step, I think taking an inventory of what are all the promises that I keep saying I'm going to do on a daily basis is so helpful, because it's very unconscious. It's like, and it's also categorizing them, because I know for myself, if I say I'm going to wake up at this time in the morning, is that really a promise? Because I think that's where we don't necessarily hold ourselves. I just say it, but is it actually a promise? Because when I don't do it, then I can flip it around and be like, I didn't actually promise myself. It's fine. Right. So to actually be able to say, what is a promise I'm actually making to myself and what is not? Is this a nice to have, something I would like to do, or is this actually a promise? Because we may find, some of us, we don't make any promises to ourselves, actually. And for others, we might find we're over promising ourselves. And so I would start there, because it's just so easy to say, that wasn't actually a promise I made.
Wow, it's so powerful. And yes, you're right. If we don't give promises to ourselves, nobody's gonna tell us. Like I feel like now as adults, like you grow up as a kid, you know, you promise your mom you'll clean your room, you'll do your homework, you'll do this and this and this. People are telling you what to do, and then as an adult, like yes, you're on your own. Like if you don't tell yourself, nobody's gonna help you. I
And
mean,
that's
you
and that's
know,
why, you know, having accountability can be so helpful. And trust me, I know it's a difficult word for many of us to hear. I've had a very hard relationship with accountability, but having people to do this work together with, and having accountability there in a loving, encouraging way is just so important. And so that's why yeah.
yeah. I could have talked for hours. I even want to bring my dad next time. We'll do like a session. Oh my God. Thank you so much, Vrin. Can't wait to hear more about the program and to offer it to the community. Very excited about this. So thank you so much for your wisdom.
Thank you, Astrid.